Okay, and so let's clarify a bit more about plants now. So you saw a plant cell right over here. So this is a plant cell, and now we're going to be explaining more about plants in general. So here is a nice example of a plant. This is a flowering plant, actually, and it has two systems. The root system, which is below ground and has the roots, and the shoot system, which has most of the stuff that we normally see when we think about plants, right? Think of like the stem, the flowers, the leaves. And there's also two important things for like flowers, for example, have two of these important conduits here, the xylem and the phloem. So these are just things you'll need to remember. These are very important. The xylem is like you see over here. The xylem carries water around the cell, and the phloem carries more like solids, like sugar, around the cell. So you have a system that's transporting water, and you have a system that's transporting different organic solids like sugar. And notice that in the phloem, you have everything flowing in like two directions, it's either going up or down, but the water is only going up. And this is mainly the effect of transpiration. So you have like the sun, and it's shining on this flower, and you guys know about evaporation. So the water is being essentially dragged up out of the plant, and it's going to transpire out of the plant. And because of that, the water only flows in one direction, from the bottom to the top. And so that's why the roots are getting water from the bottom, from the ground, and then it's being pulled up towards every other part of the plant. And let's focus on the flower a bit more now. So everyone's seen flowers before. And so flowers have a lot of different parts with names as well. And these are very important names that they like to test in the science bowl. So we have the most obvious part, first of all, is the petal. And these petals are just modified leaves, and they're very beautiful, and they attract lots of pollinators. You have the sepals. These are also modified leaves. So these were used to protect the flower when it was budding. So these are usually what closes up those unbudded flowers. And then later on, it's used as support for the rest of the flower. And then you have the reproductive parts. So you have the male parts of the flower. This is the stamen. It has an anther, which produces pollen. And this is like the male part of the flower. So this pollen that's coming from here will be used to produce sperm. And you have the female part of the flower, the carpel. It has three parts: the stigma, the style, and the ovary. So the ovary is like the eggs that will be fertilized. And the stigma is where the pollen will land. So the stigma's job is essentially, it's a place for the pollen to land. The style helps the pollen come down and fertilize the ovary. So carpel, stigma, style, ovary, this is all female. The stamen, which is the anther, and the filament, this is all male. The petals help to attract pollinators, and the sepals help to provide support for the mature flower and protect it before it has flowered. And now we're going to be talking about one of the most important parts of plants, and that's photosynthesis. So a lot of you have heard of photosynthesis before. You might have learned the chemical reaction, but we're just going to give a broad overview of what photosynthesis is actually doing. So as you guys know, photosynthesis, somehow light is coming in, and then we have sugar, glucose being produced at the end. And so generally what works is you have this light. This is a chloroplast. Remember we said that was a unique part of the plant cell. It's also a unique part of other organisms too, such as cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria can also do photosynthesis. And so you have the chloroplast, and light is coming in, striking certain molecules in the chloroplast. And the chloroplast uses this light energy, because light has a lot of energy in it. And it takes water and it breaks it down. It kind of splits it into oxygen and hydrogen. So it kind of detaches this O from these H's. And then in the process, it's getting a lot of electrons. So electrons can be used for energy. And then so it uses these hot electrons to power these high energy molecules. And these high energy molecules, their energy is used to produce sugar. So you have the light coming in, and the chloroplast uses the light to extract electrons from water. And these electrons are used, this energy is used to build new sugars. So that's the general gist of photosynthesis. Another part of plants that you want to know about are the stomata. So on the leaves, they have these things called stomata. It kind of looks like this in a schematic diagram. So you might be wondering, essentially, plants, you know that, first of all, they have to get carbon dioxide. I think it's in here, yeah. So they're essentially, when they're using the photosynthesis mechanism, they're using this energy to turn carbon dioxide into sugars. And so first, that means that they have to have carbon dioxide somewhere. The way they get carbon dioxide is they have these kind of holes in their leaves called stomata, where the carbon dioxide can just diffuse in. And then, so these are controlled by two neighboring cells called the guard cells. So when the guard cells are turgid, like very firm and full of water, the stomata is open and the carbon dioxide can flow in. And when the guard cells are closed, like they're flaccid, there's not very much water in them, then they close and the stomata is closed. And so carbon dioxide cannot get in. Now, of course, it's not just carbon dioxide. We talked about how water is transpiring out of the cell. Like water can evaporate out of these holes as well. Oxygen, the waste product from photosynthesis, also leaves through the stomata as well. So think of the stomata as holes that are controlled by these guard cells. And when the guard gels are firm and full of water, then the stomata open. And when the stomata are open, the plant can get carbon dioxide, but in exchange, it loses water to the environment. So there's a very, very delicate balance. And the way you can remember what kind of conformation of guard cell opens the stomata, I like to think of it this way. So remember, when the stomata is open, the cell loses water. And so if you're losing water and you're okay with it, it must mean that you have plenty of water. And so when these guard cells are full of water and they're very turgid, then the stomata are open. But when your cell is running out of water, you don't have very much water left, then you don't want the stomata to be open. Because if the stomata are open, then you're losing even more water to the environment through transpiration. So you close the stomata. And when the stomata are closed, it's because the guard cells do not have very much water in them. They are flaccid, and so they are closed. So open stomata, you lose water, you get carbon dioxide, and the stomata are turgid. The guard cells are turgid and full of water. The stomata is closed. When the stomata is closed, you are not getting any new carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, but you're also not losing water. And then your guard cells, the conformation is that they don't have very much water. They're flaccid, and the stomata is closed. Now let's talk about different types of plants. So plants can be split into different divisions as well. You have on the most basal line here, the charophytes are kind of like these, what we think are the closest relatives to plants. They're a type of green algae, and they share a lot of characteristics that plants have. And so plants, though, are on land. And the most basal form of plants is the bryophytes. These are like mosses. And these don't have the xylem and phloem we were talking about before. They just need to be living next to the water to get the water that they need. And they don't grow very tall either, because they don't have very much support. And then next you have the vascular plants. And the first type that we'll talk about are the ferns and other seedless vascular plants. So these plants do have xylem and phloem. And because of that, they can grow taller. In fact, we have like these giant seedless vascular plants millennia ago. And so you have the ferns are an example of seedless vascular plants, and then we evolved seeds. So some plants have seeds, the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. The gymnosperms, you see like they have cones. You might have seen them before in like firs and spruce and cedar. Those are the gymnosperms. And then you have the angiosperms, which have these extra flowers. So these are the most evolutionary advanced plants as well. They're the most dominant plants, and they're the most successful at reproducing.